Thanks for tuning into the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week I've got Katie Guillory in the house. She's a strength conditioning coach for LSU Tigers, specifically beach volleyball and women's gymnastics. But before we get underway, remember you can go to my website, check out a whole bunch of information if you're looking for continuing education. We've got courses there for physical therapists, athletic trainers, chiropractors, strength coaches, and personal trainers. And also, go online and check out setantacollege.com. They've got accredited courses and degrees for like a Master's of Science in Applied Sports Biomechanics and Movement Science, Applied Sport and Exercise Psychology. Maybe you want a Master's in Performance Coaching. Well, they have it, as well as Sports Injuries and Return to Performance Management. Go to setantacollege.com, enter RS10 for 10% off tuition today. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. And of course, click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and enjoy the show. Well, Katie, we've been enjoying some conversation back and forth over this last 6 months or so, and I really enjoyed it. And I've been looking forward to having you on the Zealous Podcast. So, first of all, welcome to the Zealous Podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. It's
Right
a
on.
true pleasure. This is awesome.
Oh, well, it's mutual for sure. So, to give the listening audience a little background about yourself and your journey between different schools and the sports you grew up playing and where you are now, do you mind giving us that kind of career path and explaining how things have gone over the last, say, I don't know, 15 years or whatever?
Yeah, it's a lot. I feel, because obviously I'm the one living it, but I'll try and keep it as concise and informative as I can. But I grew up playing multiple sports when I was younger. Obviously, got tied to softball, kind of dug my roots into that sport, and it opened up a lot of areas for recruiting and things like that. And I was born and raised in Louisiana, just an hour west of Baton Rouge and Lafayette. So I'd always grown up to be an LSU fan. My grandfather was a huge LSU fan, and it as soon as I knew softball would be a sport that I wanted to kind of take home, if you will, my dream was to play at LSU, and that ironically fell in my lap last minute, back before NIL and recruiting was even big. This was like a last minute day trip recruiting visit, if you will. And my high school softball coach was ironically roommates in college with the LSU softball coach at that time. So they had kind of just communicated and, just networked. And I guess my high school coach thought highly enough of me to recommend that, Yvette Gerard, the head LSU coach at the time, take a look at me. So from then, I played here for 5 years, from 09 to 13. Had a lot of knee surgeries in that time period, but had a great time. Eventually, we had a new head coach, that Coach Yvette Gerard at the time, that recruited me. She retired, and then we got a new head coach who is still the current head coach, Coach Beth Tarina. And it was just such a good mix that it just taught me so much about mentorship and influence and coaching, and like how you can really influence someone's life that way. Um, Pair that with a bunch of knee surgeries and rehab. Originally, I started my undergrad in pre-physical therapy, between physics being a nightmare of difficulty, as a class, and me just wanting to really understand the proactiveness of what I could do to help myself out. I kind of learned, and the light kind of turned on with the birth of strength and conditioning, and that's when my strength coach, at the time, was became a mentor of mine, because we started spending a lot of time together with all of my rehabs. Um, Ironically enough, she has known me since I was 17 years old. I am back at LSU now, and she is still here. She's still my boss. She still oversees LSU softball, and she's known me for a very, very long time. So, after I got done playing, I stayed on a fifth year, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. My entire family's in the medical field, so I thought maybe I should start there. Didn't take long. I mean, months before I realized this is not for me. Still worked camps at LSU, like did personal training on the side, kind of coached this summer ball team, kind of kept my softball ties and like my private training ties, and then just had a lot of little things going, which was great. But my parents' graduation gift to me was all of my bills, and they said, find a way to pay it. And I love it. Like, that's tough love. That's how we were raised,
Yeah.
So, what I was doing, I wasn't passionate enough about to be kind of scratching for money, if you will. So that's when I realized, hey, I love training, the personal training that I'm doing. I love where I'm doing it. I just don't love the clientele. I miss the competitive edge of collegiate athletics. I love the culture built there. I loved and missed everything about it. And I'm grateful for that time, because that really built my passion for me kind of stepping into this platform on the coaching side in college.
So
Um,
your clients then with personal training, are they just lazy fat asses that didn't really want to do anything and had
no,
you try and do all the work for them?
no, no, and yes, they were mainly kids. So they would just like come train for the summer. So it was like a sports
Ah,
performance place. Now,
okay.
what I loved the most about that sports performance place was the time where either I got to train, or the time that we train like the competitive high schoolers, or some of our MILB guys, or our NBA guys, or our affiliates, or like NFL guys that would just come and train. Like, I realized it was just me, this skinny little kid, training with these huge dudes, and I loved it. Like, I never felt a sense of, oh, they don't respect me. I thought of it as a challenge to, like, I would love to do this one day. I will gain the respect from them. It doesn't matter how I look, doesn't matter what I appear to be. Like, if I can do this, I can do this. And I quickly learned, communication, confidence, to know what you're talking about, and to really engage and teach these people that you care. And it wasn't that I couldn't do that in group settings where you had all these kids that their parents just, sent them to some little training thing in the afternoon to kind of keep them occupied for 2 hours. No fault to them. I just, it was too inconsistent, and I realized it
Mm.
really kind of started to eat at me. Because I'm a person that believes, you're going to spend your time doing purposeful things, and I understood the limitations of the job, and that was just something that really drove home with me, that I I didn't want to be a part of my daily life. Maybe some one-offs here and there, but I wanted consistency, and I wanted to be able to drive home results for these people.
Right on. Okay, so before you continue on, I want to fill in two blanks that are in my head. One, you mentioned numerous knee issues, so I'm going to assume that you were a catcher on a softball team. Is that correct?
Ironically, no. I was way too
No.
small to be a catcher. I was
Oh,
just an outfielder, that was undersized. Back then we didn't even have nutrition in college. Like, they couldn't legally feed us per the NCAA rules, um, and even with, swipe cards, and with things they could feed us at our dining halls that weren't athletic dining halls, just regular dining halls. My parents didn't have the money to buy all these extra things, and all the extra groceries. So I lived off of the normal PB&Js, and your chicken breasts and broccoli, and I was burning through calories at such a fast rate that I was actually in a nutrition class, and the nutrition professor brought me in because she thought I was lying about how many calories I was expending. Because we started doing all these like nutritional logs and stuff. So it was I was just undersized, and I had a super high metabolism. And I had never really lifted or worked out before I started college. So of course I saw the benefits of it, and then I grew to love it. And I just love throwing weights around and getting strong and putting on muscle mass. Like, I put on 20 pounds in a year and a half once I got to college, just because I love training, and I was so undersized. So I couldn't imagine if I had the resources that they have now nutritionally, man.
okay, and then you're incredibly modest, and the reason why I say that is because you didn't even mention the fact that your team went to the World Series.
They did. They
What the
did.
hell?
We did. It was Coach Best's first year. Um, man, and that was such a revolutionary year for me, just in terms of growth. Like, I tell the story all the time, because they were like, what was the biggest difference between Coach Yvette and Coach Beth? We used to have a conditioning test, and Coach Yvette was older. You know, she wouldn't run it with us. I remember the first day we stepped on campus, Coach Beth asked our strength coach, Coach Melissa, for give her a goal time, and she was going to run it with us, and everyone was like, yeah, right. She got on the line with us day one, 6 a.m., and not only did she run it, she completed it, and she passed her goal time. And at that moment, all of us, like military, were just locked in. Yes, ma'am. And we just went. And we didn't care about talent. We didn't care about numbers. We didn't care about stats. When I tell you, they did a great job of just building a culture of work, and like the right kind of work, the hard kind of work when you don't feel like it, and just how everything was going to pay off. And it paid off. It paid off.
Oh,
We pulled
so
up
cool.
we pulled off so many upsets that year. It was just such a cool year. Like looking back on it, and then she was, I think, nominated for maybe Coach of the Year or something like that. Her first year at LSU, and she inherited this team. There was no one that she personally recruited, and I think we had the lowest batting average that I think maybe of any team to this day that went to the World Series. And that just goes to
Really?
show you that the work that they had built in us, and when you have a culture like that, there's few things that can overcome that.
That's amazing. So impressive. Okay. Liberties in your future. You
Yeah,
get done with your bachelor's in kinesiology and so on, and you
yeah.
you go up to Liberty and grab a master's up there.
Yep, started grabbing a master's. They had just started an exercise science master's program, and I was actually the first class. We're a class of 8 people. First
Mhm.
exercise science master's graduate. And then I actually did a dual cognate in nutrition. So I actually, it took me 2.5 years. So I kind of got a double minor, or cognate, some people call it, in nutrition as well. Because I just didn't know where my career would take me. I didn't really have to pay for it. It worked out. And that eventually led to a full-time job for an additional 2 years. So I was there for about 4.5 years. Um, we had some turnover with directors and things like that. Great university. We had, I mean, Power Five money, Power Five resources. But I just knew it was time for me to move on, and then winded up at Illinois, University of Illinois. Was there for
The
3 years.
Illini, yes. All right.
Illini, baby, yep. And then
And what sports were you doing over there? What were you coaching?
so when I first got to Liberty, I had like men's golf, women's and men's cheerleading. Softball obviously was kind of my avenue into this field. Again through connections, and and then some things shift around. Like over my span of 4 years, I wound up letting go of men's golf, letting go of cheer. I wound up getting women's swimming and diving. I added men's and women's tennis. So kind of had a lot of opportunity with sports there. And then again, softball became my avenue to get to Illinois. I just, the head softball coach there, ironically, was a softball player at LSU back in the day. We wore the same number. Just crazy, crazy fate.
Nice.
And so softball was my main sport, or I don't want to say my main sport. I give attention. All athletes needs attention, and I don't want to ever prioritize one or the other. But I will say softball was kind of my in. I also oversaw men's and women's gymnastics, and that's where that kind of passion started. And then women's swimming and diving as well while I was there. Then I kind of was at a spot in my life where I actually called Mel, my now boss at LSU. She's been obviously a lifelong mentor. And I was like, what do I do? This is where I'm at in my life. What do you think? And she was like, just hold off for a bit. And she's like, we may have some openings here. Obviously, I can't guarantee anything, but like, if you hold off for a few months, I would definitely consider you for some of these positions. And yeah, that was history.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, out of the sports uh between before you got back to LSU, and of course now you're with beach volleyball and gymnastics, and we'll get onto that in just a moment. But while you're up in Liberty, best and worst sports for you in terms of, I don't know, the things you found uh, knowledgeable, like the things you gain the most information from, and the ones that you're like, I don't really, if I never. do any strength conditioning for that specific sport, it'll be too soon.
Yeah, that's a good question. When my director, I think in my 4 years at Liberty, I had three directors, and no, four. I had
Oh,
four.
so good job security and liberty is what you're saying.
Yeah. So when I tell you so many sports kind of changed throughout the years, not only because of my graduate assistant versus full-time position, but just the way that we were our side of things were evolutionizing. It was great. It was kind of growing pains, but at the end of the day, um, when I found out that I would pick up women's and men's tennis, um, I was really, not to say that I wasn't happy. I didn't have enough time, and I knew I was in over my head. And I'm a person who really wants to do a good job. It's not about like liking me. I want to do a good job. I want to provide a good service for these sports, these coaches, these athletes. And one of the coaches, they are the men's tennis coach. Um, we not that we didn't get along, we both had ideas. We didn't know how to really verbalize them in a way that another would understand. And I didn't understand that in the time, but now looking back on it, I obviously know that that was the hindrance. But I wound up taking the TPA certification and wound up getting certified in tennis training. And that was based on his suggestion. And it winded up opening my eyes to a ton of things. And I Lee Taft, one of them, who is now
Yeah.
kind of staple in everything we do in change of direction agility, whether that be what I dive into or what we teach our interns.
Great guy.
Really just it really made me reconsider energy system development, the practicality behind that, and understanding agility versus change of direction, and then how that plays in different surfaces of tennis courts, and really how agile and athletic these tennis players were. And then then on, I was hooked. So I was actually sad to let them go, them and softball to let them go. They're a fun group, but swimming and diving has always been challenging for me, more so swimming. That would be the sport that I'm like, they're great kids. They work hard. They're just so overtrained all year round.
And
And
they're not ground based. All your other,
they're not
well,
ground based.
yeah.
The coaches write up these crazy circuits, like on dry land circuits, and it's just chaos to control. I think the culture of that is it will take so much headway to like change the trajectory and minds of these swim coaches who have just this. It's not old school, it's just like more work versus better work. And that was
Yeah.
always hard, because these kids would just come in, and this was before we even had any type of internal measurement units or anything where we could like really track response and dosage. And you can just tell these kids were spent all the time. So and we'll get into that with gymnastics too, because the same thing them with bony injuries and such. It's just one thing after next. But they just have overused shoulder injuries, overused hip injuries, and it's like trying to talk to the coaches is like beating a dead horse. And I've heard that from almost every strength and conditioning coach that oversees swimming and diving, regardless of what institution and whether that be male or female or whatnot. Diving,
I
I
think you're actually
actually
bringing
I
up a really
love
good point right now,
go ahead.
because, that it's really easy to point fingers at the strength and conditioning coaches when you have a team that is plagued by injuries. You're going to say, "Oh, it's the conditioning program. My God, can't they give them a little better insurance policy? Why do they have this team that's so plagued by injuries?" But if you look at the volume of work and the outside of the gym, the load volume that's placed on athletes just because of the duration, the frequency, and the intensity of
Yeah.
practice. You're like, well, how am I going to condition an athlete if you're constantly breaking them down in their playing environment, in their competitive field? Like, I I don't even know if they should be lifting right now because you're bringing them in broken, and you're loading the hell out of them on broken bodies, and you want me to load them further? It's like, are you kidding me? This is like this These are the conversations I'm having off the air with several colleagues that you and I both have in our circles, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's got to be so frustrating.
Yeah, it's just such like I call it like a seven-headed horse. it's like, where do you look? Because everything plays into it, right? And I don't want to be this person that thinks that they know it all or have all the answers. But at the same point, coaches and athletic trainers and people, they have to meet you halfway. That's part of that organization or that team, if you will. And although we have problems, like currently, although we have problems like that with gymnastics, that's a sport, but I think we have great strategy and communication and openness, and like we meet constantly and we're always talking about every single individual athlete, and we're trying to brainstorm, which is, a big reason why I originally reached out to you. Was I got to a point where the basics were great. I started understanding how their practices were run. I built the culture in and out of the weight room that I wanted with these kids. But how do I take our training to the next level? What is kind of a missing puzzle piece? And not to get all the answers, but at least to set me in a trajectory that would provide some more clarity or some answers to that puzzle piece that would make sense, and allow me to kind of view what I'm doing in and out of the weight room a little bit differently, or more holistic, if you will. I think a lot of schools, so if we go back to the example of swimming, they're high volume, high repetitive sport as well. You just, especially at the lower levels, you just don't have the resources and you don't have the technology to be able to tell you that. So it becomes hard, especially when you get a coach who's hard-headed, and it's got to be a high performance model in regards to how you're going to handle a team in a sport like that is either injury prone, or the kids are going to come in broken, or super high impact. Like, I don't think gymnastics is super high volume. It's just such high impact. And these kids don't eat, they don't take care of their bodies. And then you look at a sport like swimming, who's high volume. The impact is really not that much. It's just high volume again and again all the time. So
Yeah, and with the
really,
the physical development of the athlete, I'm thinking the female gymnast primarily, not so much the male, but the female gymnast is going to have a certain shape and structural alignment. Excessive anterior tilt to the pelvis, excessive lordotic curve, excessive proximal hamstring lengthening. Like, all
oh
these
yeah,
things are going to set them up to not be able to deal with the impact and the load that they're constantly going through. So and it's the movements that are creating these postures over time,
yeah,
right? And so now you're combining, and to add to this, the demands of the moves ever increasing to try and get a better score than the previous year, or your competitor on another team. Is like, now we're seeing double backs as compulsory. It's like, are you kidding? A double back with a double twist is something that is like, almost in my old days of competitive gymnast, which was much lower level, we would have A, B, C, and D moves. Of course, those are out the window now. But A
yeah,
was
yeah.
the basic level. Is like an iron cross on the rings was an A, and it had to be in everyone's program. Now it's like, oh yeah, an inverted cross is an A or whatever. It's just like the level of ability
Yeah.
has exponentially grown, but the bodies have stayed the same.
Yeah, and we all know the human body is a great compensator, right? So
Permits.
what happens is, as the skills advance, as the difficulty increases, so does the compensation. So you can look at what we do from a lot of ways of like understanding forces and planes of motion and joint alignment and how the body's going to compensate. What is good biomotor abilities and what's bad? What is good compensations? What is bad? What is like what is their body trying to tell you? And that's really kind of what I've tried to delve into this year. And I think what you've helped me with a lot is just seeing, like, there's not a practice that goes by that I watch that I'm not like, when I watch them take off or land or do something, and it's amazing,
Oh,
it's fascinating. But I'm also concerned. I voiced the coaches to this at our end of the year meeting last year. All of these difficulties of these skills are increasing. When is the rules for these landing postures going to change? And if that's something we need to take to the committee, I told him, I said, I'm probably nobody. They don't know. The committee don't probably give two craps about what I have to say. But I will go wherever I got to go with you, because I am that firm a believer that if we really teach them the biomechanical disadvantages of all of these landing positions and the injury risk that it puts them at, if they are truly in it for the right reasons, then I can hope that they'll make a change. And I can't
And
promise
you're only
you will.
speaking about the successful landings. We don't
Yes.
even have to talk about the unsuccessful. I
Well,
could tell you all about my sacrum just from missing my front giant dismount off the horizontal bar and landing on my tailbone time
yes.
after time. It's like, oh damn. I should point out, by the way, to listening audience that again, your modesty is just way ahead of you because you are one of the strength conditioning coaches for the reigning national champions, LSU Gymnastics. You're going into your championship banners hanging from the rafters, and now you're one meet in with another one coming up pretty soon. You're starting out this season as the national ranked #1 team. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Thanks. It's not me. I will say that, and that's being genuine and honest. Like these kids, I am so grateful that they will run through a wall, I feel like, for anybody. And that just says a lot about how our coaching staff has built a culture. And I truly think every hand that touches our program has these athletes' best mental, physical, and emotional interests in mind. And we bust our butt 7 days a week in season to be able to make sure that we can do our best. And we're not always successful. There's still things that are going on, and it's still chaos, and injuries happen, and whether that's acute or chronic, and I hate it. It doesn't make it ever any easier because I want these kids to just be successful and healthy. And at one end of the scale, I can drive myself nuts over it. But the other end of the scale, that also drives a lot of my motivation and my mission into what I'm doing. For an example, this of just
Sure.
digesting, better functionality of the entire body, and obviously with a lot of Achilles research or lack thereof in mind. So
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing, Katie, is that you're in a unique situation when we're talking about D1 gymnastics. It I can't really think of too many sports where your college age athletes are almost to the point of on the other side of their peak age for performing, right? Like most college athletes are aspiring to the professional level afterwards and where they're going to increase. And they probably won't reach their peak until they're 5 to 10 years later after graduation. But you're looking at Olympic gymnasts, they are 14, 15, 16. They're high school level athletes. And 4 more years, they're going to be at your campus. So and they have gone through almost their entire life, probably starting at 3, 2, 3, 4 years old, maybe a little bit later, and they're
yeah,
going in
it's
the tumbling
happening.
classes. I mean, what that's got to be a completely different scenario than
Yeah.
any other strength conditioning programs out there. How, how does
You can't even
right?
wrap your head around it.
I know.
Um,
Honestly, for those that aren't watching video perform, I am actually gripping my head, going, "How do you get your head around that?"
I say this is what I tell every recruit that walks through our door. By the time you get to me, you're in the nursing home. You're geriatric age in your sport. So I say that to set the scene of, yeah, you're gonna come here and you're gonna get stronger and you're gonna get faster and you're gonna get better at gymnastics. But the rate in which you do that may not be as fast as another kid your same age in another sport. And I don't say that to dishearten them. I say that to lay the facts and foundation and realization. And they always giggle at that, and I do like to add a little bit of humor to it. But I like to tell them, hey, we're gonna test, we're gonna do our best to make sure that we standardize as much as we can for you individually and for like what you need to do and where your body's at. But I also, if we're gonna go to war, and you're like, what I consider college athletics is war in any sport. You're coming here to win a national championship. We're gonna push your limits. When you go to war and you're already in a nursing home, you tie those two things together. I can't guarantee that you're not gonna get hurt. but I can guarantee that we're going to care for you. I can guarantee we're never going to take risky decisions. We're never going to make risky decisions. I can guarantee we're always going to have your best interest in mind. And we're always going to treat you like an adult as long as you let us treat you like an adult. And we're just going to take care of them as a whole. Like, yes, you're here to do gymnastics, but there's more of that. There's more to the human than that to me, especially in a sport that has so much physical, emotional, and verbal abuse attached to the history and the culture of it long term. I really take pride in that, you know, and that's not a pitch to appease the parents of the athlete. That's wholehearted, and that comes from everyone in our staff. And I will go to my grave saying that. I believe it. I believe in what we do, and nothing that we do is shady. And I lay it out there. Hey, you're in the nursing home. I can't guarantee we're not gonna get hurt, but I'm gonna guarantee you if something happens, we're gonna take the best care of you, and you're gonna have the best resources to do it. And that's just a risk you take playing this sport at the highest level, you know. And I always tell our coaches, like, hey, if you bring in a hurt recruit, I can't turn a Honda Civic into a Mercedes Benz, you know. Like, we're gonna have to just kind of bandage this up and run some maintenance tests on her every once in a while, you know. And they're okay with that. Like, it's just they understand it, but at the end of the day, you're if you come out as a recruit and you come out as a recruit out of high school and you're coming into college and you're completely healthy, that's so few and far between. The pool of people that they can pull from in that regard, our coaches to recruit from, little to none. So I can't blame them because I know their hands are tied. It's like they know it. It's just a situation we haven't found an answer for yet. And that has kind of led me to be a little bit more concerned and be an advocate toward our gyms now. So like in our summer camps and stuff, I've tried to advocate. I've spent our lunch breaks trying to advocate toward our people who run gyms to where I can help facilitate maybe better strategies of what they're doing, to where hopefully if I can help educate them and we can create better systems for them, by the time these kids actually get to college, maybe they're not so beat up. So it's kind of just kind of investing in your lanes of what's going to lead you to where I'm at now, you know, collegiate setting. What can I invest in that's going to basically drive my stock up by the time they get here? So I
Now,
I can't guarantee anything, but I can guarantee nothing will happen if I don't say anything. So
yeah, I can tell that you're taking care of your athletes, and within that framework, you have some of the sports in which you've created strength conditioning programs for working with the athletes are some sports that have the highest incident rate of eating disorders for both men and women athletes. Diving, swimming, gymnastics. I think the only thing you're missing right now is wrestling, right? But
yeah.
so we don't talk about this very much. At least I don't know in the 200 plus episodes of the podcast I don't know if we've ever really brought up the aspect of eating disorder, but this seems appropriate right now to like how do you and the staff how do you address it? How do you screen for it? Like, I imagine, like, if I could just go by statistics, I imagine you've had to address it more than one occasion.
Yeah, great question. And I will say it's always a slippery slope. It's never black and white. We all know that. You have to understand that the human, like understand the motives of the athlete of why they're doing it. And I will say it takes great meticulous work from our entire staff and primarily our head coach and our nutritionist. So like I said, we meet as a staff every week all year round and we go through every single athlete. And we kind of have our check-ins from each sub department. So like strength and conditioning, what you got this week, and I'll kind of speak a little bit. Nutrition, what's going on? Is there anyone that is meeting with you? Is there anyone who you see may need attention, or the rest of the staff may say, hey, so and so looks like or she's mentioned she's been lethargic all week, or she's mentioned, you know, she is trying to gain weight or trying to lose weight, or all these things. And then we leave it to our nutritionists to kind of reach out and address this and kind of spark the flame, if you will. And then where we go from there depends on what the nutritionist and that kid kind of talks about. And look, it's not about, hey, pointing fingers at the athlete and sitting down with them and putting in a room and doing all these things. They'll tell you till they're blue in the face. It's about education. It's about caring for them as a whole, but it's also about helping them understand how these two things interact. And if we're recruiting athletes like we hope we are, that really care and want to win at the highest level and have a full understanding of what it takes to do that and how you can take care of your body the other 20 hours out of the day, if they truly care, then they'll start to make different decisions, or they'll start to want to change and do whatever. Unfortunately, our nutritionist, even at the highest level, oversees, I think, 4 sports total. So her touch time for these athletes is not as much as I think anyone would want to be, but that's where she gets to utilize me. And I've told them transparently in every single meeting, I'm like, I don't mind talking with this kid. Of course, I'm not trying to overstep the nutritionist. I'm not trying to undermine the head coach. I'm just trying to create opportunity for an equal, medium that this athlete can see every day. They see me just about every day, all year round, and create conversations, check-ins, like anything I can do to help facilitate a better regimen for this kid, whether that be stemming from an emotional issue, whether that be stemming from just a body image issue, or they just have no idea and it's just an education piece. We're able to digest that. Nutrition is able to give us the foundational information we need to move forward. And then we just kind of create a system of checking in, whether that's informally, formally. And again, the athletes don't have to do it. That's the catch-22. So, when they sign papers to come compete here, you have your mandatory things and you have your not mandatory things. And luckily for me, what I do with them is mandatory. As much as we would either shoot advice out to them and recommend them to go see our nutritionist, or our nutritionist reach out to them and wanting to set up appointments, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have 100% adherence to that. And then we just continue to treat the human, like care for that human, try as much as we can. And at the end of the day, we wind up pretty successful, but we're very specific about what we let our coaching staff know. There's plenty of conversations that happen between myself, our sports psych, and the nutritionist, where we talk a little bit more specifically about an athlete or two that maybe we can't voice specifics in front of the coaching staff via concerns or NCAA rules. And then us three know how to better manage this kid, and the coaching staff trust us to do so. And all we do is just give them, updates, rightfully so, in ways that we can verbalize that follows the rules on that. So definitely a tricky situation. I think it's always going to be kind of like walking on eggshells as far out as I can see, but I am not afraid to have those conversations. I'm not. And I've told our head coach, and I'll do it. And it's not about a kid liking me or disliking me. It's about me caring for them and wanting the best for them, and for them to understand that this is vitally important to what you do on a daily basis.
Right on. Well said. Okay, so I'm going to show my bias and my how would I say it, my short-minded, closed-centeredness here. Because you're also a strength conditioning coach for beach volleyball, and I gotta say, when it comes to beach volleyball, of course, living here in Santa Cruz, California, I don't really think outside of California when I think of beach volleyball. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think, oh, Ohio, Michigan. And although you guys are on the Gulf Coast, I really don't think of Louisiana or LSU for beach volleyball. So, first of all, forgive me for that. But
All good.
oh my gosh, what's
Absolutely.
that like? So, beach volleyball, it's 2-on-2, right? Men's and women's, or are you only one gender that you're working with?
Just women's.
Okay.
I've said this since I stepped on campus at LSU. This is wild. This is a wild statistic. So backtrack a little bit. When I first got hired on LSU, I was hired for men's and women's swimming and diving, and beach volleyball. Then it winded up becoming a ton with women's swimming and diving. The head coach and I had some, so it was best that we restructured, reassigned, and with that, winded up getting put in my lap with gymnastics. So I say that because since I've worked at LSU, I've worked with all of the barefoot sports on campus. So I've only worked with barefoot minimalistic clothing sports. Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy. So it's funny because I arguably work with one of the tallest female sports on campus and the shortest. They're both barefoot. They both wear
Yeah.
barely any clothes all the time. They just it's cool because one has a ton of ground reaction forces and one doesn't. One is very multi-directional based, one is not. Um, they're very short and stocky and they should be great lifters if they weren't hurt, and then the others should be, you know, long, lanky and thin and have an aerobic energy system like a tank, you know. So it's so fun though, to train them both, and I love that they love each other, like when they cross paths, and because they have me in common, it's a good time to see them interact with each other. But it's been challenging. It's been fun. It's been good. I've kind of taken different angles with both of them, but I'm blessed, man. They're both top 10 programs. The coaching staffs are phenomenal. How LSU winded up as a beach volleyball program, I don't ultimately know, but I have a guess because um where their facility lies. I know we're landlocked. So you look at all these, you know, West Coast, East Coast schools who live by the ocean. We're landlocked. But what LSU invested in was they basically had this open area that they didn't know what to do with, and that's how beach volleyball, I would imagine, out of my own conclusion, developed because it used to be tennis courts, and actually half of the softball field was where it is now. So my freshman year in 2008, fall of 2008, I played at our old softball field before we built our new one in the spring of 2009. So they basically demolished the softball field. They demolished the courts, and they basically built, it was a great structure to build beach volleyball court. So it kind of has a tennis setup, arguably the nicest beach volleyball stadium in the country. And a lot of it is due to it was just kind of a, what do they call it? You take a tennis facility and you flipped it, and they poured sand into it and kind of extended some areas to make it more applicable for beach volleyball. And that's where it sits. And ironically enough, some of that land was the first land that I stepped foot on as a freshman on campus, and beach volleyball and gymnastics are right next to each other. So I can just flip flop all day long. There's been times where beach volleyball, like we have a home tournament and someone is sick, or just like we're playing a lot of matches in a day and it's hot and they need rest and relaxation, and you know, we're in kind of a confined space and it's people everywhere and just a lot of human traffic, that I'll take them over to gymnastics and I'll turn off all the lights in the facility, and they'll kick back in a massage chair and they'll take a blackout nap, and then I'll go wake them up in like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll warm up. So it's just so cool to have different resources right there, and it's been awesome.
And everyone fits in the chair.
For the most part. For the most part. Thank God it can expand a little bit. So yeah.
Oh, Katie, you're living your dream job, as you said at the beginning here. And what I'm curious about is, of course, we have opportunities that present themselves, and if we have the awareness to recognize them for what they are, and almost always say yes to the opportunity that present itself, then chances are we're going to be on the path toward that goal of living your dream job. But there's other elements that come into play. But what I want to know is, like, from a visualization, a mental standpoint, like, from the earlier years through, did you have a vision board? Did you have a whiteboard? Did you write down notes in your book? Did you start scribbling? Where you like, how did you create the path that put you in your dream job?
I I come from a very hard parenting system, if you will. Like my dad and them grew up on farms. My mom grew up with no money. So like from very early on, it was just the work ethic was just taught, like you're gonna have to work for everything you want to earn. And nothing's gonna be given to you. Um, and that kind of set the mentality. And then whenever I got to set the mentality in high school, whenever that paid off to wind up my dream school, same thing. I just want to be this underdog kid who no one knew about and wanted to shock the world. With all my knee surgeries, it obviously didn't really happen, but now in hindsight, I can see how that developed me into this person, this resilient person who, no matter what they are faced with, no matter what challenges, no matter the uncertainties, no matter the doubters, it doesn't matter. I'm going to find a way to figure it out or get things done. I've always said from outside when I got done with college, be a way maker, not an excuse maker. And it's so easy to find excuses in everything we do. And especially now with these kids, it's so easy to find excuses in everything we do. How can I take my mindset and my work ethic and my passion, and in great healthy way, how can I vomit this onto these kids and without them ever knowing it? And I've really just taken care of a lot of the cultural aspects. I've worked my butt off. I've been willing, cultural aspects. And early on in my career, I will tell you, Mel, my boss now, who's at LSU still, I really didn't use her or Coach Beth for a ton of references or connections. It just happened because I didn't want to go wherever I wanted to go, wherever I wanted to end up. I didn't want it to be, oh, because she has connections at LSU. I didn't want, if I could have taken it off my resume, I would have taken off my resume to where people wouldn't have known. It just fell in because I knew at the end of the day, my resume can only take me so far. I had to work my butt off and make a name for myself of this resilient person and who was going to build resilient athletes and resilient teenagers, if you will. And LSU was always my dream job. And when I got back to it, it took me a while to like realize, hey, I'm in this seat. I took so much pride that it was almost crippling for a second. I had to like let myself breathe. But if I would not have had my mentors voice back to me all of the leadership qualities that I possess, separated from my physical abilities or lack thereof, they saw something in me that if I was never told, I don't think I would be where I'm at right now, regardless of how smart I am, how dumb I think I am, whether I think I have the talent, the knowledge or not. When you have multiple people who you respect as mentors tell you a lot of common things, or I'm sorry, a lot of things to you that all are commonalities, you start to believe it. And they did a great job of instilling that in me, and I believed it, and I just went with it, and I figured the rest would take care of itself. And I was never given any shortcuts. I even at LSU, like Mel told me, hey, it's you and one other candidate. Like you're gonna have to win this outright. And I selfishly hope that you do, but I'm gonna stay back on it, and let fate take its course. But like you have to win this job. You have to get this job. And we all know that all resumes and connections do is get you a seat at the table. But what are you gonna do to continue to have that seat at the table and earn that on a daily basis? And that's all I've ever done is just providing a great service for whoever I'm with. Big on energy. Like I believe like your energy introduces you before you ever walk in the room and before you ever say anything. Like I can tell whether you're having a good day, bad day. I'm a big energy and aura person. And I just pay attention to that, like your body language and everything. I've just always wanted to be a good example that no matter what hardship anyone's gone through or anything, like you get to choose your attitude, you get to choose your work ethic, and those things can't be taken away from you.
Ah, so well said. I love it. Okay, I got probably like two questions remaining here. One of them is you've run quite a gamut of sports, strength conditioning, but there's several other sports that are in the ethers there. And LSU, like we've got basketball and football and a whole bunch of others, are there any kind of fruits, aka other sports, that you would like to taste, that you would like to kind of bite into? Even if you're loving what you're doing right now, are you intrigued by strength conditioning of other sports?
That's such a good question, Rocky. I will start answering that by saying, getting back to my alma mater and not having softball. Like, I had to give up softball, and I thought that would be hard. But it's not that I felt like I had softball all figured out, but there's something about gymnastics that it just intrigues me, and it's a blessing and a curse because I can go down these rabbit holes and like there's so much unknown about it, and there's so much evidence that I think is lacking in a lot of things that we do, and I mean that from science. Like I just think it's so young in the realm of what labs and research and things have done for the sport of gymnastics. Specifically, if we really look at other than just like movement, I I don't know. I've thought about maybe indoor volleyball a little bit, but I'm already working with beach, so it's similar enough to kind of fill that cup for me. Yeah, I don't know. Not at the moment. I've always asked myself, like, would I go work football? Like, would I be a football girl? I don't want to say it's out of the realm of possibility, but it doesn't intrigue me enough right now for me to want to jump ship. I'm perfectly content where I'm at. I just, and a lot of that is because I see, even in beach volleyball, I see this huge gap of knowledge that there's no research on. That I'm actually
Yeah.
working with some of our bioengineers on campus we're starting a research project with them because I've read research article after research article, and there's nothing on it. And I look at gymnastics and there's such a gap in, how we can do things so much better. And I'm telling you, it is an uphill battle, and that uphill is almost straight up. It is steep as can be, but that's enough to keep me hooked. It's a lot of work, and it can wear me down, and it can tire me out. But at the end of the day, if I could figure something out and help these kids now or generations to come, that is never, not to say never been done, but like that research hasn't provided us yet. And like that would be enough for me. It doesn't even matter the sport ultimately that I work with. I really haven't had a desire to work with basketball as much. I've worked with men's basketball in my internship, and I've worked with some one-on-ones in my private sector facility way back in the gap. But yeah, I think I'm at the peak interest of my sports of where I'm at. Even if my boss came to me tomorrow and said, "Hey, I will give you softball," I would tell her no thank you, because as much as I can make myself sick over all of these areas that I think we could be better at, I think it's intriguing enough that and promising enough that I can make a difference.
That's wonderful. Okay, my last question is, how can people follow your exploits? Instagram, LinkedIn, anything else, Red or whatever?
Yeah, Instagram is going to be the best option. That's probably what I'm most most on, and that is steel_Gil. Steel like a steel plate, like a metal plate in a weight room, and then my last name is Guillory, and I've kind of inherited the nickname of Gil since I was at LSU in 08. Yeah, that was my nickname, so that just kind of stuck. So that's what everyone calls me. No one calls me Katie, Coach Katie, nothing. It's all Coach Gil.
Coach Gil. All right.
Steel Gil is my handle on Instagram and Twitter. I don't have a LinkedIn, which is probably bad. I probably should. Yeah.
Well, if you're happy with where you were, you don't need those connections
Yeah.
after all.
It's overwhelming and overstimulating. So I try and just dive into a few things versus have a lot of things that I have little interest in.
Well, I'm glad you've got the interest that you have, because it's just a joy every time we speak. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
It has been such an honor, truly. Well, that's another episode in the books. I want to thank Coach Gil for coming on and sharing everything she did. What a great conversation. Remember, check out my website, rockysnyder.com. If you haven't been there already, you got a lot of good information on there. And go to setantacollege.com and check out the different types of degrees they're offering. And until next week, go out there and make it a good one.